Whether it's children or adults, wealthy countries or developing nations, around the world, people are putting on weight. What can we do about it? I'm Stefanie Dekker, and this is The Stream.
I don't feel bad about being fat at all. I don't feel a single iota of shame about how much I weigh.
I'm so embarrassed by the way that I look.
I just genuinely love my life, love my body, love who I am, so I would like to stick around as long as I can.
I am actually ignored because I'm fat. I am actually not taken as seriously because I'm fat. I am actually passed over for things because I'm fat. I am actually been missing out on all sorts of things because I'm fat. This fear is true.
This is going to be a message for fat or obese people, so if you're not that, just keep scrolling. What are you doing?
I wouldn't recommend anybody be fat in this world. It is horrible. It is so traumatizing. It is so isolating. People are evil. They are cruel.
No, obesity is one of the fastest growing health threats of our time. The World Obesity Federation predicts that 1 billion people will be obese by 2030. That's double the number since 2010. Now, this epidemic goes far beyond diet. It's shaped by inequality, food politics, and a system stacked against health. Well, we're going to break down the scale of the crisis, the countries hit hardest, and what is it going to take to turn the tide. Let's bring in our guest to discuss this, Adrian Scarlett, known on TikTok as Bye Bye Fat Man. He has dropped more than 64 kilos through diet, determination and dancing on the platform. He is joining us from Livingstone in Zambia. We have Dr. Rocio Salas-Whalen. She's a physician specializing in obesity medicine and endocrinology. She joins us from New York. And Ogweno Stephen, he serves as a trustee and board member of the World Obesity Federation, and he joins us from Geneva. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Ogweno, if I can start with you. Obesity is on the rise. The numbers are huge. You have called this a silent epidemic that is continuously growing. Can you give us a sense of the numbers and perhaps why this is happening?
Yeah, again, thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about the silent epidemic, which is obesity. And it's true that obesity really has been on the rise. For the past decade, we have seen a doubling of obesity cases, and with more and more individuals living with obesity. So, for example, by 2030, we are estimating that 1 billion people, which is 1 in every 8, with the world population being 7 billion. So 1 in every 8 people will be living with obesity. And even now, we are seeing the cases that are shooting on the rise. So for instance, countries, primarily obesity was in the countries in the islands. So this is countries like Samoa, Tonga, Tuvalu, St. Kitts and Nevis, which have the highest burden of obesity. But now we are seeing obesity rising even more in developing countries. And on the continent of Africa, we are seeing obesity is on the rise. In Asia, in Malaysia, we are seeing, in East Asia, we are seeing obesity is on the rise. And everywhere globally, when you look, more people are adding weight. So clearly, we have a big burden here with obesity that needs to be addressed. And if that is not addressed, then we have a very big problem at our hands in the next few years.
Why? Why is this happening? Well, Dr. Rocio, you mentioned in a podcast recently 5 key factors that contribute to obesity, and they are genetics, hormones, the environment, lifestyle, and aging. Now, there's a lot of talk about the importance of recognizing obesity as a disease, right? You see so many people in your practice. How would you describe your patients? What do they struggle with?
Well, it's very interesting because as a medical community, we always thought of obesity as a lifestyle problem, as a willpower problem. And we used to recommend to our patients, eat less, exercise more, and waiting for them to come back with results. And it was not happening. Patients were not losing weight. So we stopped having the conversation, and then we just dedicated ourselves to treat all the complications from obesity. But after treating many patients with obesity, and we are learning that obesity is not a willpower power problem. We know that there are many factors that can put a patient at risk for developing obesity, right? As you mentioned, those are a very big umbrella that I'm categorizing the causes of obesity, because we consider obesity now as a chronic multifactorial disease. And what I've learned through treating thousands of patients, hearing their stories, is that patients were actually trying. Patients were actually listening to what we were saying. They were exercising. They were eating less. They were doing diets that we didn't even hear about, right? And the results was just not happening. So I have yet to meet the patient with obesity that wants to have obesity, hasn't tried to lose weight, and hasn't done all their work from what they can possibly do to try to lose weight. But because that's not the problem, we weren't seeing the results.
Adrian, you have had a very personal battle with obesity. You've set up, your Instagram Bye Fat Man. You have been very candid also in the challenges, how to actually deal with obesity. How would you describe, what has the battle been like for you?
It's a multifaceted battle, and I think a lot of it's psychological. I would agree with the doctor, because nobody as a child aspires to be obese. Everybody would love to have a healthy, perfect body, as maybe is portrayed in the media. But certain factors, which I believe we've picked up on, lead to maybe stress, depression, which leads to people maybe overindulging. So I was diagnosed with a binge eating disorder. So whenever I feel under pressure, I'm more likely to eat. I completely rationalize where it's wrong. Even in the midst of overeating, I would know that I'm doing it and yet still indulge in the food. So I've had to go through certain psychological and lifestyle changes, and it's a constant cyclical battle. I make progress, I regress, I reset, and I push on. And I think my story is quite common. I've used shortcuts, I've used food replacement products. I'm willing to try all sorts of things. I go to the gym, I try, the dancing has been great, but again, I've regained a little bit of weight. I go back and I reset, and it's just a constant battle. And it has been really since my teenage years. And I attribute a lot of it to the psychological factors that underpin the binge eating disorder. Just not having a healthy relationship with food as a child, and having the freedom as an adult to make my own choices, making bad choices, and then not finding a way out of the trap. It's like there's a little fat person inside of me. And I've alluded to this in my videos that, I have to ignore the voice. I have to make it go away. When I think that I'm winning, it comes back with a vengeance. So, it's a constant struggle.
Dr. Rocio, I saw you nodding. What do you respond to that?
It's a very common story that I hear every day with my patients, is that the constant struggle through the years, and for many patients for decades, it's a constant battle that is 24/7, that it revolves around every plate in front of the patient. It's a constant mental struggle. How is this going to impact me? How am I going to feel? How am I going to gain weight? Am I going to feel guilty? Am I going to have to restrict myself? The mental toll that obesity takes in patients is something that we're just starting to discover, that we're just starting to listen. And if we can do any measurement, either medications that we have available now, is why we will not release and relieve somebody for all those years, decades of mental and physical struggle.
A lot of it comes down to food, doesn't it? Well, much of the unhealthiest food out there is designed to be inexpensive, easily accessible, and highly addictive. With the new generation of weight loss injections curbing appetites, some food manufacturers are actually trying to fight back.
There's a company that's bioengineering foods to outsmart Ozempic and other GLP-1 medications. I'm Dr. Well, TikTok semaglutide and tirzepatide expert, and here's how they're doing it. One of the inevitable effects of taking Ozempic is people are eating less food, and one company, Madsen, is fighting back. Think of Madsen as a consulting company that helps big food companies make food more addictive. Chemicals in our food produce pleasurable sensations. For example, when they found out that people liked chips more when there was a louder crunch, they made the food crunchier. They can even alter the structure of salt crystals to make them absorbed more quickly. This, as far as I'm concerned, is biowarfare. It just goes to show you can't trust processed foods or the makers of processed foods.
Ogweno, you also have a personal story. You were, sorry, Dr. Rocio, I will come to you. You said you were an obese child, you struggled with food, you were constantly thinking about food. How much is the food industry to blame for where we are at these days?
Yeah, I believe the food industry is really to blame when it comes to the obesity pandemic, and especially when it comes to the burden of obesity and the craving. The food industry has designed foods to be hyper palatable. They've designed foods to be very easily accessible. They've designed the food to be to be cheap. It's funny to hear that healthy food is more expensive, yet it takes less to manufacture, and more ultra-processed food is more cheap. And all of this is part of the foods industry's tactics to ensure that you are always constantly eating, you are always constantly having the availability of food. And I remember in my case, and even today, when I was actively fighting my childhood obesity, I remember I couldn't sit down for 2 hours and not think about food. I couldn't concentrate in class past the 2 hours. I always needed to eat. And more often than not, you find that once you jump onto an ultra-processed food like crisps and fries and soda, you find that you always want to continue eating because the food has been designed exactly to do that. And that is the challenge that we've seen with the food industry, who do not care about your health. They do not care about how well you're supposed to do. They do not care if you live long enough. The food industry, for the most part, cares about the bottom line. What is the bottom line? To make as much money as possible. And if this is the bottom line for the food industry, how will they do it? Make people consumers of ultra-processed food. And this is a challenge that we continue to see on the rise. And even with what we just showed with people fighting the semaglutides, it's becoming an even bigger problem. And people need to know that the food industry is not on your side. It's entirely on the other side, looking at profit, and you need to be aware of that and then find ways to counter eating of the ultra-processed foods.
The food industry is not on our side. Quite an extraordinary, very strong statement. And it is, of course, important. Psychology also something people battle with. Dr. Rocio, everyone is talking these days about what's called the GLP-1 drug, right? Ozempic, Wegovy. How revolutionary are these drugs when it comes to obesity?
They are groundbreaking. I believe they're going to have a greater impact in our society, in our health, than the discovery of insulin. And definitely, I want to jump back up the food industry. The food industry will need to be held accountable for the epidemic of obesity that we currently have. Right? Same as the tobacco industry had to be held accountable at one point, the food industry will also need to. And I agree completely. The bottom line is money. I compare the food industry with the drug industry, with the cartel, right? Nobody's going to stop it because bottom line, it is highly productive of money. Now, if we think about disrupting the food industry, what could possibly disrupt the food industry? The GLP-1 medications. And several companies here like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley have done studies of the impact of GLP-1 in the food industry. And definitely the patients that have been on GLP-1 report a 60 to 70% decrease in the consumption of ultra-processed food and more consumption of meat, poultry, fish, fruits, and vegetables. So what's going to be the biggest food industry disruptor is going to be the GLP-1 medication. So that's how the impact that is going to have in a larger scale, but in a human, in a person, in a patient, it changes their life, right? It relieves them from that 24/7 constant thinking of food. It teaches them how to eat healthier, how to get motivated back again into taking lifestyle changes like exercising and making better food choices. Because the food industry, what they do is they've created a reward for their food, right? For the processed food, for the ultra processed food. GLP-1 blocks that reward from food. So patients don't see food anymore as a reward, and there's not that mental connection with food, including in binge eating.
Adrian, you're listening to this. I'm sure this is something that you have looked at. Are you tempted by trying these drugs? Like, because I was listening to your pre-interview, and you're saying they sound great, but they don't address the psychological aspects that you and so many struggle with. Would you consider trying this medication?
You see, I think it can be revolutionary, but the danger is we move from putting a lack of faith in the food industry, which I agree 100% with, but we're putting then our trust in big pharmaceuticals, who are probably the other great evil empire in the world. And once the drugs become used and become quite global, the prices will probably rise, and whether they become affordable for ordinary people may be a challenge. With the withdrawal of US aid, I've seen the impacts on pharmaceutical companies, control over supplying various drugs in sub-Saharan Africa, where there is a dependency now. Once the funding's withdrawn, individuals can't access the medication. So while I think it's a great kickstart, and I found that the total food replacement diets were, it's the sustainability factors when you step away from a dependency on a drug or a dependency on a powder, which I was using, which was great. Induced ketosis, I lost at one point 150 pounds. We also have to take personal responsibility. I recognize that I've needed help. I've had therapy before. I seek support for my obesity, but at the same time, there is the personal accountability. Big food companies do try to lull us into the security of the foods that they produce, but at the same time, we also need to recognize that's happening, rationalize it, and try to overcome it. But like I've said, the psychology behind it is what makes it so difficult, and where I've struggled. So I think as my colleagues are saying, there's such a complexity behind it. And perhaps as well, there's a lack of compassion towards obesity and obese people in the global society. I mean, there is this mindset that it's your own fault. Whereas if someone has another eating disorder, there tends to be more kind of community compassion. But I don't think that overweight people feel that. And I think it's even worse for women than it is for men. But then that could be another point.
Dr. Rocio, I see you. Yes, go ahead.
I would like to make 2 points on that. The first of all is I hear this, and I hear in my patients too, but the problem that is happening is that we haven't accepted, even patients with obesity, we haven't accepted obesity as a disease, right? Because if we were talking about hypertension, if we were talking about type 2 diabetes, there wouldn't be that hesitation of, why am I going to need a medication? I should just do it by myself, right? But obesity is a chronic disease that we have treatment for it. Chronic diseases we don't cure. Chronic diseases we control. And I'll put again the example of hypertension. When we put a patient on medications to reduce their blood pressure, once we control the blood pressure, we don't stop the medication. We keep it. It's the same concept with GLP-1. So they're not, and they will never design to be used short-term as a kickstart. Second, taking a GLP-1 medication is not taking the easy way out. It's not like I give up, I'm just doing a medication. That it's completely the opposite. Patients actually have to be involved into getting the right results with this medication, right? To maintain muscle mass, to decrease percentage body fat. there actually is more work from the patient than if they were not on the medication. And I think that's a big misconception. And the other point that I want to make is, yes, the food industry is culprit, but we currently have a severe problem of obesity. Even if today we change the food industry, it's going to take several generations for us to see improvement in our health from changing the food industry. But at the moment, we have an acute, severe problem with obesity worldwide, and we have treatment for it. So yes, I think eventually the food industry has to change, but that's going to take generations for us to see results.
Ogweno, I'm going to come to you in a second. I see you nodding your head. I just want to look at the map. As you can see on this map, more than 30% of the adult population in the orange countries are obese. Now, some of those countries are the United States, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, South Africa. We also have Australia and New Zealand, and in the Gulf and Middle East, there is Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Turkey, and Romania in Europe. Ogweno, are countries doing something about this? Are they tackling the food industry? Are they putting things in place to help us make the right decisions?
Yeah, so on that, two things are happening at the moment. So this year we are going to have the 4th United Nations high-level meeting on non-communicable diseases, which is going to happen in Geneva. And these usually are meetings where governments come together and decide what are going to be the next priorities for global health and for other relevant policies across the world. So what we are seeing now is a lot more countries are beginning to recognize obesity as a disease and obesity as a chronic problem. However, in the zero draft of the declarations or the negotiations to be had in lead up to the World Health, in lead up to the United Nations high-level meeting on obesity, has only mentioned obesity 3 times and emphasized mostly on prevention and excluding the treatment bit. But this is just a first step, and we are hoping that as the negotiations start, there will be more and more recognition of the seriousness of the problem that we have with obesity, and also more recognition of the benefit that would be had if obesity is addressed. And so obesity, again, goes beyond individual will and individual responsibility. Obesity control has to be ingrained in policy, and we've seen countries implement some policies that have contributed to reducing their rates of obesity. So, for example,
okay,
in
Ogweno,
Mexico,
I'm sorry, I have to jump in there because we only have a couple of minutes left on the show, unfortunately. It's such an important discussion, and we could go on for hours. Now, we've discussed the many factors involved in weight gain, and there is often so much more to someone's story than meets the eye. Listen to this.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. How does someone become this overweight? It's not like I didn't know what I was doing. It's not like doctors haven't told me that I had a problem. It's not like I haven't heard my whole life how fat I am. So how does it get to this point, right? Everybody wants to know that hasn't been here. Well, it's a lot easier than you think. I won't get into huge details. I will just say that I am a survivor of sexual assault, rape, and abuse. I found that when I ate, I felt better. Some people do drugs. Some people drink. Me, I ate.
Adrian, we have just about a minute left on the show. I want to give you the final word. What is your message to young people, to anyone struggling with obesity? Yes, we're hearing about these revolutionary drugs, and they really are working for a lot of people. But of course, this is very much a personal journey. What is the advice that you give them? Is it a struggle where I think a lot of people feel alone?
It is. I found just creating the videos has been therapeutic, because it's given me a lot of people who I can talk about my problems. And if as a young person, if you can talk to people at school, talk to your doctor, talk to family members, and just be upfront about it. Since I've confronted it, taken it on head on, and recognized I have a problem, it's helped me. And burying our heads in the sand doesn't help. There are different ways to do it. trying to be healthy, trying to live an active lifestyle, and keep the active lifestyle going. Young people are very active in general. Keep playing sports, keep taking walks, put away the PlayStations and similar things, and be active, and just try to get that mindset so you don't fall into the traps of the food addiction and binge eating disorders, which can happen to anybody.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are out of time on this very important conversation. We'll keep going. Adrian, Dr. Rocio, and Ogweno, thank you so very much for joining us today. And thank you for being part of this very important conversation. And I'll see you soon.